Well, I've had tummy aches longer than that TikTok ban. Guys, I thought I was going to be coming onto this website today to say RIP TikTok. You're with Flappy Bird and Vine now. But in the end, the TikTok ban didn't even last long enough for me to make the video. It has already been unbanned. I'd say Last Night was a movie, but it was more like a short film. It was ironically more like a TikTok, but I will say it was a day for the culture. So Americans, just before they went to bed, got this notification saying they had been blocked from using TikTok. The app went dark for 14 hours, and then after 14 hours, it was back. The Americans were allowed back onto TikTok. I will say the app did feel really weird without you guys. It kind of felt like when you're at a party, but the person who invited you to the party hasn't arrived yet. You know, we were all standing around twiddling our thumbs like, what do we do now? Some people were mourning that the Americans were gone. Some people were celebrating that the Americans were gone. I was just asleep. That's all I did. I feel like if it happened to me, I would just be walking around the house like that one crazy lady in the Hunger Games, just saying TikTok, 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 TikTok. TikTok. Anyway, all this to say, this had me reflecting a lot on the legacy of TikTok, but specifically booktok, the absolutely insane place that is TikTok. If TikTok was a person, it would have been institutionalized. And I say this with peace and love in my heart. Like, I am very much part of that community. If you guys are going to solitary confinement, I'm going to be in the cell right next door. And so today I thought I would make a good old-fashioned tier ranking list, because yesterday tears were shed as we thought we were going to be mourning this app. So originally this video was going to be a TikTok, but then it turned out I had so much to say that it wouldn't fit within the 10-minute constraints of that app. So we're here, baby. Over the years, I have read a number of booktok books. I've spoken about this before in a previous video, but I do think the term booktok book is just a marketing term in the same way that classic book is. And you end up with loads of books that are completely different, like the works of Charlotte Bronte and Jane Austen and Charles Dickens and Daniel Defoe sitting alongside Bram Stoker and Nabokov. You know, these books that are thematically incredibly different, but the one thing that unites them is that they are revered books. That's kind of the case with when you go into a bookshop and you see the As Seen on BookTok shelf. These are all just books that are popular. And I know about popular because I have read an absurd number of them. I didn't realize quite how many I had actually read until I started to make this list. And it turns out I've read about 65 books that I think are considered booktok books, which I think is enough due diligence to create a definitive tier ranking list. Of course, disclaimer, these are just my opinions. This is just my take on these books. You may disagree with me. That's great. I love the booktok space. I come in peace. Okay, so first up, we need to make the tier ranking chart. And in true TikTok fashion, I feel like we should use some trending sounds and audios and memes. So the top tier is My Shayla. These are the best of the best, the creme de la creme books I wholeheartedly recommend to everyone walking planet Earth. The second tier is Holding Space. These are books that we are holding space for, that are important, that are worth the read, that I think deserve their place as celebrated books. Okay, so the third tier is Timothy Chalamet, That One Time. Not this time, but this time. This emotion is exactly how I feel towards the books in this category. You know, like, I have some questions. I don't think these are perfect books, but I think they are acceptable. Then we have Baby There's No Plane. This is a category for books that I don't recommend, but I wouldn't actively be like, do not read that, you're wasting your time. Which brings us to the category that does represent that sentiment, which is, what an odd thing to say. These are books that went viral, but kind of in the way that like the coronavirus went viral. For all the wrong reasons. This is something I would actually wear a face mask and sanitize my hands to avoid. And I do think that if you come into contact with these books, you should warn everyone you know and love. So anyway, let's get started with the ranking. The Pumpkin Spice Cafe. This book is kind of like a carved out pumpkin in that it's pretty on the surface, but ultimately the insides are hollow. Margaret Qualley was found lingering around this book looking for the substance. But you know what? It is cozy autumnal vibes, so I think it gets a point for that, at least. Song of Achilles. My copy is still water damaged from my tears, and so it's going to the top of my tears. We meet again, my sworn nemesis, the Spanish love deception. This is enemies to lovers, except they hate each other for literally no reason. And then he takes a couple lessons on Duolingo and she decides that she loves him. Ladies, the bar needs to be higher. Next we have Yellowface. The thing is, I think that R.F. Kuang is one of our most talented and exciting writers we have creating art today. However, I have to say, I think she'll only reach her full potential once she starts to trust that her readers are smart enough to keep up with her. She's incredibly intellectual, she's incredibly switched on, but she will knock you over the head with the point of her book, and it's like, Rebecca, we get it. This is a fun literary thriller, which is a searing indictment of the publishing industry. It's just like 100 pages too long. The List. If The List has 0 haters, I am dead. I just don't know why we would need a book about people lying about sexual violence. I feel like this is genuinely harmful. I think it's backwards. I think it does nothing for the culture. It uses the fact that it's about influencers as a marketing tool and a grab, but really it isn't about influencers at all. Lord, take some of the hate away from Colleen Hoover and give it to this book. Anyway, Everything I Know About Love. This is a fun and snappy memoir of life, love, friendship in your 20s and how they can be the great loves of your life. Specifically, it is about female friends, but I love Dolly Alderton's style in her nonfiction. Yeah, this is great. The Love Hypothesis. Every scenario in this book is so far-fetched and ridiculous that it should be categorized as fantasy, but it's not. It's a romance. It's kind of Star Wars fan fiction that somehow was published. It ends with us. Now, I do think that this book had good intentions, but the marketing of it is the biggest issue. Like, why were they releasing a coloring book for a novel about domestic violence? That is insane. And it's kind of this creation of a brand around this specific book, not around Colleen Hoover, but this book specifically, that I think has just rubbed everyone up the wrong way and has dulled the message that the book actually was meant to convey. So, trying to forget all of that has happened and just going back to the bare bones of the book that Colleen Hoover wrote, you do definitely have to look past some of the cringy elements that haven't aged especially well. Well, they've kind of aged like milk in the Sahara, because the book is addressed to Ellen DeGeneres. Like, the book is written in a series of letters to Ellen. One thing I will say about Colleen Hoover is she is very good at rewarding her reader. What I mean by this is that she understands the theory of Chekhov's gun. Chekhov's gun is a principle when writing a narrative that every element that you introduce will end up at some point being relevant to the plot. So if someone walks on stage with a gun, later on in the play, that gun will be used to kill somebody. In Colleen Hoover terms, this is a magnet or a tattoo. Like, things that are introduced always end up having some kind of meaning that drives the plot later on. And that is very satisfying to read. And I think that's why she has managed to capture such a large audience. Do I think her books are perfect? No. I do think It Ends With Us has its place. Speaking of which, It Starts With Us, the most pointless sequel of all time. This is a shameless cash grab. I not only want a refund, but also financial compensation. That is bottom of the barrel. Nothing happens! Ugly Love. Unfortunately, this book will never ever recover for becoming famous for the line, "We both laughed at our son's big balls." Yes, that is a real line that is printed in this book. Reminders of him, no critical thinking, just vibes. This could have been an interesting discussion about rehabilitation after spending time in prison, but it just never goes there. It just uses the fact that the character has been in prison as a kind of plot device. Verity. I think this is her best book. Not that the bar was like especially high, but this one does manage to pole vault over that bar. I'm kind of torn because it doesn't feel quite good enough to be in the holding space category, but it also feels better than these other books here. So I'm going to put it in holding space for now. I will hold space for this book. Better than the movies. This is so cheesy. It triggered my lactose intolerance. It's not bad necessarily. It's just so predictable. Check and Mate. I have genuinely never cared about the fate of two people less than I did in this book. It's like The Queen's Gambit, just without the cheekbones. It's like The Queen's Gambit if it was written by a 15-year-old. But you know what? It's inoffensive. It passes the time. It's fine. Pineapple Street. This book is like an episode of Real Housewives if nothing happened and also they all just randomly became super woke before the final ad break. You know, like that one friend who's too woke? That's kind of this book, except it's all very surface level. It kind of brings up issues just to say them. It doesn't necessarily consider them in a thought-provoking way. It kind of is just like a bingo tick sheet. My year of rest and relaxation, the most annoying person you know loves this book. And it's me. Oh yeah, we are holding space for Otesha Moshfegh. You, again, is not Joe Goldberg, the sequel. It's actually a retelling of When Harry Met Sally. It's actually very charming and fun, I will say. It is completely shameless in the way that it just totally rips off Nora Ephron. I can't believe there's not a lawsuit here. But at least it does it kind of well. You know what? I'm holding space for you again. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. It's amazing how a person can make a deal with the devil and then end up living for 300 years and never encounter a person of color. How does that happen? I recognize this book does have many issues, and I wish actually it had been a series so that this idea could have been fleshed out a little bit more, but I did enjoy it. 7 Days in June, my Shayla! Whoa. That is bopping its way all the way to the top. One of the steamiest, sexiest romance books I have ever read. I recommend this to everyone. Two writers realize that they've been each other's muses all along. This book invented love and lust. It fulfilled every single one of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The Duke and I. It's kind of weird, this book, because it basically starts off for the first half using the most embellished, ornamental language. Like, I know that thesaurus was getting used and abused when Julia Quinn was writing the first half of this book. And then the second half is written in the most basic layman's prose. I don't understand what happened, whether she just stopped editing it after the halfway point, she got bored, or asked a small child to take over. I don't know what happened here. Also, what Daphne does to the Duke is horrible and awful, but never really addressed or reprimanded. It's a miracle what they did with the show, because the book is horrible. Romantic comedy is based on SNL, but normalize writing books about comedy shows that are actually funny. It's so awful. Like, one of the skits that the main character proposes for their version of SNL is what dogs would Google search. It's so painfully unfunny, it's actually diabolical. Jail time for this book. Next we have The Cruel Prince. Sorry, nothing in this world can convince me that this author wasn't just making the plot of this book up as she went along. There was no planning involved. Everything is just so random. All of the lore that she introduces has no real purpose. This was a cruel reading experience, let me tell you. Now we have arrived at the patron saint of romance books, Emily Henry. Happy Place is my favorite. This made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. You know what? I think it might be my Shayla. Controversially, I will say that Book Lovers is the only one of her books I didn't enjoy. I just didn't really believe in the chemistry between the two characters. People We Meet on Vacation is good, and Funny Story, I think, is brilliant. I will certainly be holding space for that one. You know how people do like an annual juice cleanse? Instead of that, every year I read an Emily Henry book, and it cleanses me on the inside. Red, white, and royal blue. The stakes in this book are so low, you could trip over them. Despite the two characters being the president's son and the prince of the UK, but like everything is just so quickly resolved that a problem is never a problem for very long, because they just have all of the means in the whole world at their disposal to figure things out. They're like, oh, I'll just fly across the Atlantic and have a chat with my partner. So everything is very conveniently resolved, but once you get past that and acknowledge that this is a sort of queer utopia, it is very charming. You've charmed me. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. What do you know about the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo? That's my Shayla right there. This is literary, but it's also fast-paced. It's the ultimate book I recommend to people when they're trying to get back into reading. I imagine Taylor Jenkins Reid is never hungry because she ate with this book. Malibu Rising, if you love a gossip, if you love a little yap, this one is for you. And I will be holding space for a very long time for this book. Daisy Jones and the Six. Ooh, this might also be top tier, you know. This reads like a Netflix documentary. If you love Fleetwood Mac and smoking cigarettes, this one is for you. The Midnight Library, for me, this book is all fart and no poo. You know, like the concept is great, but the execution, I don't know, it feels like a bad self-help book. And I don't know if the message is that empowering. It's like, no, don't kill yourself. You're so sexy. The metaphors are cheesy. It feels like a kind of reductive take on mental health, like kind of pop psychology. I just feel like we can do better than this. You know? The Fourth Wing. I felt like this was okay. This is personal opinion because I'm just not a fantasy babe. The big plot hole that I just couldn't get over is that this is a school, like a dragon school, where people train to be part of an army, part of this movement, I guess. But 90% of the kids die at the school. And I just think if you were involved in military strategy, that is a terrible technique. That is a terrible approach. That's just not effective use of manpower, I feel. Like, put them on the front lines, surely. Why would you kill off 90% of your manpower before they even make it to the battlefield? I don't get it. I don't get why the kids just die in training. I also find Violet, the main character, so insufferably annoying. Baby, there is no plane. Now, before we move on and talk about the next book, I want to talk about something that is always top tier in my estimations, and that is Squarespace, who have very kindly sponsored today's video. Over on Squarespace, you can design the most beautiful website or online brand using their range of templates. You don't need coding experience. You don't need a master's degree in web design. You can just use one of their hundreds of templates and customize it, as well as features like the ability to make a blog, an email sign-up list for your customers to have flexible payments, and AI SEO, which basically means that your website will appear on search results. So all of your hard work goes to good use. If all of this sounds good, you can head to squarespace.com right now for a free trial, and then use the code jackedwards at squarespace.com/jackedwards to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you so much to Squarespace for working with me on this video. And now, the next book is Iron Flame. And here they tried to sort of do a cookie cutter Fourth Wing. I feel like this was written over the course of like 8 sleepless nights, and it shows. It has exactly the same plot development as the Fourth Wing. Also, the annoying thing is it's like enemies to lovers trope, which I hate anyway. Enemies to lovers is my least favorite trope. I think you will see this as the tier ranking progresses. Just because if we already know A is that they're enemies and B is that they're lovers, you got to create a whole new alphabet in between those two things. And the story needs to be compelling. So in the Fourth Wing, it's enemies to lovers, right? But then, because in Iron Flame, they were like, well, we just need to replicate what we did before. They become enemies again at the beginning of the book. So then you get the enemies to lovers arc again. And because we'd already been there, done that, got the t-shirt, I was like, I'm not fully invested in this anymore. Iron Flame, I'm sorry. What an odd thing to say. Cersei is amazing. And I think we're getting a new Madeline Miller book sometime soon, her retelling of Persephone. I am like a bird with its beak open wide, waiting for whatever scraps Madeline Miller will give me. Madeline Miller, you will always be famous. Project Hail Mary, even the biggest hater of sci-fi books, me, would love this book. Why did this have me crying over a little alien robot thing? Like, I was sobbing into my cereal. This is so brilliant and fantastic, and there are sciencey elements, but it's still so compelling that I didn't even mind. This is how you lose the Time War. If you go to the dictionary and search up the word yearning, you will find the ISBN number for this book. It's so gorgeously written. It's very lyrical and poetic. I will say it took me a while to get into it. Like, for the first half, I had no idea what was going on. Once you figure it out that these two beings are writing love letters to each other from the opposite ends of a time war, it's just magnificent. This is one that's even better on a reread. I'm going to put it in holding space just because I do think my reading experience the first time was not the best. The Inheritance Games. A girl randomly inherits a billionaire's fortune, and no one has any idea why or what her connection is to the billionaire. She's absolutely baffled, but then she just gets completely dickmatized by the Hawthorne brothers. But she sticks around and tries to also figure out what this fortune means, how it became hers. I'm like, girl, get out there, buy yourself a boat, buy yourself a private jet, travel around the world Taylor Swift style. If I inherited $1 billion, I'd be taking a helicopter just to get the TV remote from the other side of the room. Sorry, Greta Thunberg, if you're watching, I wouldn't actually do that. Well, there's no risk of that happening, so we can just have a silly, goofy time and joke about it. I actually did quite enjoy the Inheritance Games, though. It was fun. A Little Life. My Shayla. A deep breath before we think about this one. I understand that this is too much for a lot of people. Totally, I understand that. And I always say, I recommend only reading this if you've read the trigger warnings and you believe you're in the right headspace to do so. Having said that, I think that art and literature are supposed to push boundaries, especially if they do so in such an exquisitely written way. This book is silky smooth in its prose. For me, it's a modern classic, the way that it depicts relationships, entire lifetimes for these characters. You really stick with them. It's very clever because there are no markers of specific time frames, so we never really hear about technology or world events. The only markers we have for time is like Christmas, New Year, Thanksgiving, birthdays. And I think that's what makes it feel like a modern classic, because it could exist at any point within kind of the contemporary era. The fact that this evokes so many visceral emotions from people,
why would you write this?
I think makes it an absolutely amazing piece of art. And I will stand on business. I've been saying that since day one, and I stand by it. Bunny. This is the absolute optimal level of insane that I love. It's unhinged, it's deranged, it's about a cult, about these pretty girls who dress in beautiful summer dresses and eat sweet treats all the time and then kill men. So this is a riot. It's such a fun campus novel. Heartstopper. I mean, come on, hang every page of this in an art gallery, please. Wrap it around the room like Monet's water lilies, because that's where it belongs. Everyone say it with me. My Shayla. One Last Stop asks the question, if your lover was stuck in time on the New York subway, would you have sex with them on the New York subway?
I thought this was a classy party.
And if your answer is yes, then you will love this book. And also, I respect it. A love story, but it's also an ode to found family. Casey McQuiston, you knocked it out of the park with this one. Okay, the next book is I'm Glad My Mum Died. This, for me, is the best celebrity memoir I've ever read. You know, we all grew up watching child stars, and I think that Jeanette McCurdy really sheds light on what that experience was actually like, exposing the children's entertainment industry whilst also being extremely vulnerable and also leading with empathy and compassion, I think, even though she was treated so horribly. And I think she's very honest about her emotions. You know, she talks about how she was so jealous of Ariana Grande when they worked on Sam and Cat, but she acknowledges that it wasn't Ariana Grande's fault. It was the circumstance that she was in. So she's like, yes, it was valid that I resented her, but that was not her fault. That was coming from within me. And it was a product of the circumstance that I was in. All celebrity memoirs should be written like this one. It's so good. They both die at the end. I love the concept of this. And I think I just found it so frustrating because the world building is so excellent. Like, you get a call on the day that you are going to die from a company called Deathcast. What I wanted, I think, was more of a social commentary on the ways that the greed of capitalism causes so many people to take advantage of these people who are on their dying day. Instead, it's kind of just a cheesy love story, and the way that these young people talk to each other just didn't really feel like the way that I think young people would talk to each other. So, baby, there is no plane. And for me, the prequel, The First to Die at the End, is kind of like the same thing, but not as good. And I think there's so much more it could have done. It happened one summer. Listen, I liked it. I didn't say it was good. I said that I liked it. When I first started to read this, I thought I was going to absolutely despise it because the character is like a spoiled brat, but she's kind of like banished by her dad and sent to live in a small town. She falls in love with a kind of fisherman, and I just thought it was really hot. I'm only human. I thought it was really steamy. I thought it was really hot. The perfect level of spice for me. White Nights. You think you know love, and then you read White Nights. White Nights is about two lonely people who bond over a series of conversations and experience this kind of temporary bliss in one another's company, but it isn't destined to last. And really, I think this book is about the way that we project our expectations and our hopes and our desires onto other people and how risky that is and how much we can get hurt by doing that, because ultimately people will never live up to the expectations that you have of them if you do that. I think this is a perfect novella. It's from 1848, but the emotions that it conveys and represents and portrays are just as pertinent and relevant today in 2025. And that is incredible. Mexican Gothic, this takes about 250 pages to get to the meaty stuff. There's a lot of fat that you have to get through in order to get to the really good bit, but I was really rooting for Noemi, who is the main character. She kind of goes to this mansion to see her cousin who has sent her a letter asking for help. This is Timothée Chalamet that one time. The Dead Romantics, sorry, not the Saddam Hussein hiding spot cover. What? What is this? This is a book about a ghostwriter who sees ghosts. Which feels like the kind of book concepts that you come up with when you're laying in bed at night and you can't sleep, but you never actually write. Well, this author did write it. I respect her for that. I thought it was okay. You know, it's like aggressively fine. The 7-Year Slip, however, this was hot. Icebreaker, this one was lukewarm. It's about an ice skater falling in love with an ice hockey player. I will say it's pretty progressive in its attitude towards sex, but having sex in the back of an Uber was crazy. Baby, there is no plane. The Hating Game, this one was cold. This had gone off. This was curdled and moldy. I don't want this one. You can keep it. I painted my bedroom walls the color of your eyes. Shut up. Come on. Give me a fucking break. This is why they laugh at us. This is why they say that BookTok books are bad. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, I would read this. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, again and again and again. It's about two young people who meet at a hospital when they're young and they bond over video games, and then later in life they build a video game together. It's incredibly innovative in its storytelling style. At one point you're kind of like in a video game. There is a scene that I will never forget reading because of the way it made me bawl my eyes out. I really, really like this book. This is a good one. Christmas Tree Farm. Listen. I said I liked it. I didn't say it was good. This is a Hallmark movie in a book. It feels like it should be starring Lindsay Lohan. A woman buys a Christmas tree farm, but she hates Christmas. She's a human Grinch. And then an absolute hunk arrives who loves Christmas and invites her to spend it with his family, and his sister and her best friend embrace her and are so kind to her. But still, she couldn't possibly go there. And you're like, why, girl? Just do it. This is cheesy, but in the way that at Christmas time, you're just really craving some cheese. It does the job. It's like when you're starving hungry and you'll eat anything, you know? A Man Called Hoover. Listen, I never thought I would sympathize with an old person. You know, someone who did this to the economy, someone who did this to the climate. Oh, you really sat back and let that happen? You're the reason I won't ever retire? You're the reason I won't ever be able to afford a house? But all that being said, this is an old person I would make an exception for. I would die for Hoover. He's a cantankerous old curmudgeon, but he is lovable, and the more you get to know him, the more you are rooting for him. So Frederick Backman, I think, has the perfect comedy style. I love this book. I really, really love it. Crying in H Mart is responsible for my therapy bills. This had me crying like Kim Kardashian. It's a great memoir about someone whose mother has died, and the way that her mum used to show love to her was by cooking food. And so she goes to H Mart and looks at the food that her mother used to buy, and that is her way of feeling close to her mother and mourning her and being able to think about her. And I think it's incredibly special. The 48 Laws of Power. Listen, the fact that this book is designed to look like a big red flag is not a coincidence. That's actually because it is one. This is just like bullshit. It's just the worst of the worst. Atomic Habits. This has gone viral many times on TikTok and BookTok, and I think that that is for good reason. This, for me, is the one self-help book I think is actually very, very useful and that I would actively recommend to people in my life. And that is because this book gives you practical, applicable advice that you can utilize on a day-to-day basis. And it's not 80% waffle like most self-help books are. Most self-help books, you need a side of syrup because they are all waffle. So I really rate this one. I got a lot out of it. I still think about things I learned in this book today. In fact, you know what? I'm going to put it in the top tier because I still use the tips that I got from this book every day, and I reference it when I talk to people. So you know what? I rate Atomic Habits. The Secret History. Donna Tartt, you will always be famous. I'd love another book from you when you're ready, in your own time. Well, you know, we could get a wiggle on, maybe. This is the Dark Academia book. There's a reason that this has inspired so many generations of people and has continued to reach new audiences just now on BookTok. If We Were Villains is also Dark Academia, but instead of, in The Secret History, they're kind of studying classics. In If We Were Villains, they're studying Shakespeare. It's a group of thespians. And at points in the book, you are like in Shakespeare plays. So the chapters are written from the perspective of the actors while they are performing Shakespeare, but the lines of Shakespeare are applicable to their emotions and their scenarios and what they're going through as well. That is so smart. ML Rio, you ate with that one thing. It's just so good. It's so good. Pucking Wild is an ice hockey romance that deserves jail time just for that pun alone. This was so filthy that I wanted to like massage my retinas after reading it. Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. Many odd things are said. I actually have a whole video on my channel where I read this and Icebreaker. I did a deep dive into the ice hockey romance trend, if you want to go and check that out. But now, normal people. I mean it wholeheartedly when I say I would die for Connell and Marianne. I love them as if they are members of my own family. I love the way that this book deals with miscommunication and the reality of the way that we hurt people we love sometimes by accident, and that people are flawed. This is raw, it's believable, it covers so many things. This is a perfect book, I think. Sally Rooney, I adore you. Diary of an Oxygen Thief. It's like, this guy read Lolita once and he was like, yeah, I could do that. Except he just hated women. I would not wish this book on my worst enemy. It was published anonymously, which makes sense to me, because if I had written this drivel, I too would be embarrassed and I would not want to put my name on the cover of that book. There is no tier low enough for this book. This is actually the worst of the worst. Good Girl's Guide to Murder. This girl is nosier than Pinocchio, and you do have to kind of get past the fact that she is a bit of a precocious brat, and not in the kind of bump in that way. She is cringe, but she is free. Ultimately though, this is an enjoyable multimedia detective story, and it's really good as an audiobook, I will say. Carrie Soto is Back is about a tennis player who has retired but comes back for one final match to kind of retain her title. And it's a really great story about aging, the way that the media treats women, especially in sport. Is it Taylor Jenkins Reid's best work? No, but the bar is so high that her worst work is still better than a lot of people's best work, if that makes sense. We Were Liars. This is a great book to read if you haven't read a book in a really long time. Does that make sense? I don't mean that in a shady way. I just think it's the perfect book for getting back into reading. I think that's when you'll appreciate it the most. And finally, The Night Circus. I like this book. It's about this magical, moving circus. I do wish it had focused slightly less on the romance element and more about the world building and the battle between these two characters, but it's worth the read. So that is my finished tier ranking list. I think I'm pretty happy with it. Let me know what you would change, where you agree, where you disagree. It's okay for us all to have different opinions. There is no way anyone is going to agree with every single ranking in this list. That is fine. What I hope this does encourage, though, is a discussion. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you do want to go and follow me over on my BookTok account on TikTok, my username is jack_edwards. I'm really putting a lot of effort into posting high quality content over there. Well, you can be the judge of that. If you think it's high quality, a win for me. In all seriousness, I love the BookTok community. I'm so grateful that we have everyone back, because the BookTok community is strengthened in numbers. You know, the more the merrier. And this community thrives the most when we are all having a conversation and we are all respecting each other and sharing different views, but really listening to what other people have to say. I'm very grateful for all of the book recommendations I've got from this little platform. And we'll see where we're at in 90 days and whether things have changed again, whether TikTok does eventually get banned, who knows. Personally, I believe that's censorship 101. It's a way that people have shared their creativity, have bonded, have made businesses, and it's also a way that a lot of people have rediscovered their passion for reading. So if any government or individual tries to take that away, I will always be against that. But for now, thank you so much for watching this video. All the best, stay in touch. You can subscribe if you're new, and follow me on all my social media. Links will be down below, including TikTok. Okay, all the best. Goodbye.